Do you still read chess books? Do you like
Oh
to?
yeah, I still read chess books. I'm a fan of reading chess books, but of course, I like reading them more online because it's so much faster. But I do have physical books sometimes, especially if I'm on a plane. I like to read books. In fact, they had this. I remember I was listening to, I think, Kenny Smith or something, one of the ESPN guys. But I think he was like, I learned when I was on a plane. This psychiatrist or somebody was sitting next to him. She was like, "Yo, don't go to sleep on the plane." He like, "Yo, I'm scared. What you mean don't go to sleep on the plane?" And she was like, "Well, if you're on the plane, your brain reaches this height of something. Where like when you're in the air, your brain is at its highest level of something, whatever it is in the brain, where that you retain a lot more information." So it's best to read or write things down. Never knew this. I was like, dang, that's deep. So now when I'm on a plane, if I mean, sometimes I'll fall asleep, but nowadays I try to read a book.
That's what I do as well.
Yeah,
that's what I do as well. And I didn't know that that's
Wow.
the method to follow, but intuitively, I guess that's where I go. That's
good.
where I feel I retain the most information.
That's crazy. You say that. Yeah, that's some type of thing that I learned from this. I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to read a book every time. My favorite books now are people have always say like my grandfather Tal and my uncle Nesmedinov because of my style of play. Those are just my ancestors in a way. But I did like My Life in Games by Tal. I think my favorite one though is actually the Greatest Attacker in Chess by the Rashid Nesmedinov, Tal's trainer. So one of my best books. I think I read that book and then I scored 6.5 in that tournament. I remember I was hot. It was some of them games were like straight out of the book. I was sacking a queen here. I sacked an exchange and then a pawn just to make sure his king couldn't castle. Ended up winning that game. This was against Brewington when he, had before he
We
just
just had an interview with MVL, and he was talking about the flow state in chess.
Ooh,
I
that's
guess
nice.
that book gave you the flow state
state.
for that tournament, for that
yeah.
specific tournament. Did
Yeah.
you ever experience that? With like a training you did beforehand, before a tournament, and then you
Yeah.
implemented certain...
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
That
I'm
7-0
more-
streak. What did you do before
the
that?
thing is, I was actually sick before that.
Wow.
So I was like working, but I was just on the sofa, like
Chilling.
yeah, I'm
getting better.
not feeling good. So I came to the tournament. I was still sick a little bit, not
Yeah.
that much. And yeah, that tournament was. I don't know why. I don't know why I did well there.
Just hot. That
It
boy
was
went
just
crazy. That's history.
circumstances worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do remember. I had a bad tournament.
Okay.
This was back in 2008, I'd say. Maybe 2009. 2009. I had a really bad tournament somewhere, like probably European Championship. And then I was working on my own, like nonstop. And all I could think about was chess too. Now I don't know what changed, but I don't think about chess as much naturally. It doesn't like enter my head as much.
Yeah.
Probably just age. But yeah, I was just thinking about chess nonstop, working in my own way. And then my next tournament, I won almost all my games. It was the Russian Team Championship 2009.
Heat.
I
was just
gained
working.
gained something like 20 something points,
Yeah, that's huge.
which was a lot.
Especially at that level.
That's a
Yeah.
lot,
Big boy level, yeah.
So yeah, but
It's so difficult to replicate
Yeah,
that
who
also,
knows,
right? Like how
Yeah.
do you replicate that?
I know.
You want to hold on to it. You want to hold on to that flow.
we don't know
So
what
difficult.
brings success, right? We just have some ideas for
yeah.
us, but then does it always work? Like
Right.
we don't really.
Which is why I think because I read that book, it doesn't hit the same. Because when I read it, I'm like, I already seen this. So I have to like find more like something to excite me in certain games and et cetera. Because I don't get that same excitement when I first read that book. So I'm always looking for like newer books and trying to grow and get more knowledge before I go into tournaments always.
That's an interesting thought, because very often with like new experiences, you're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, now I live this. Where do I get my next high?
Yep.
You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
my next new experience, my next new that.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, in fact, I think commentary, another reason why I love doing commentary is because for me, people don't look at it like, even Danny mentioned it, he's like, James Canty just loves chess. But no, he was kidding, but he also was for real. Like, I actually take commentary is like, for me, they're paying me to give free lessons. I am talking about the game, obviously, but I'm learning. Like, for instance, from this one, I look at end games differently after this tournament. Where like, it was so many end games that it was just like, wow, this is how high level chess really kind of is. You reach a lot of end games, and then of course, if you see it from Magnus' point of view, I mean, you reach a lot of end games, and then you just keep pushing, try not to make any mistakes, and then they make one, and then you win the game. And it's like, if you could try to implement that even just a little bit at any other level, you're gonna be great. And then for me, I've studied Dvoretsky twice now. Maybe not all the chapters, especially on chess, what makes it easy. I know for a fact there's 4 pawn in-game chapters on Chessable that I went through, and then there's 3 rook in-games. So these are the most common ones. So I went through 7 chapters in there that I frequently go through. There's a lot of other stuff in there, but I've made me a better in-game player. Not that I like going to them, but to reach the next level and for me to actually really level up, I'm gonna have to get more comfortable with the knowledge I do know and go into these in-games and actually win some games there. But for me, I always learn something from the commentary. So especially from this last one, I am more comfortable now than I've ever been in in-games, ever been.
And when it comes to endgames, calculation is actually like
Even
pretty much
better.
everything. Like, no, like it really is.
Calculation over everything.
No, it
Yeah,
really
baby.
is. Like there's a lot of principles,
Yeah.
but even if you don't know anything about endgames,
Wow.
calculation will bring you so far.
Deep. That's deep.
I know. I really think so. I think a lot of everyone assumes top players know so many theoretical endgames.
Right.
But besides the basics, I don't know if top players have memorized so much stuff.
Yeah,
it's feeling and calculation.
I think it's some of it's like general feeling, but just most like.
Even Kuro said something about Devereski when I asked him about it. I'm like, what you think about Devereski? He was like, yeah, it's a lot of stuff that you don't need in that book. And I'm like, now thinking back, when you say that comment, that's the first thing I think about is like, yeah, okay, there's a lot of stuff in this book that you can use. For instance, square the pawn or like a knight adjacent to a king with a pawn on the H file, can't catch it diagonally, whatever. There's stuff, little rules that are cool in the book, but the foundation, right, is calculation. Over everything. That's shopcantymerch.com. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really true. I mean, I think it's like you need a basis so that you know what you're aiming for. Like, let's say you calculate and you reach a rook 4 versus rook 3 endgame. You need to know what this, because you can't calculate any further.
That's true.
You need to know, is this a draw theoretically or not? But those basics, like you have that, or like is rook bishop against rook?
Right.
It's a draw.
Right.
But you need
That's
to know
so
that.
harsh.
Otherwise, you're like, oh, I can't go for this because
We
it's
get a Magnus Ferrugia
right.
thing.
Well, I
that's
feel
crazy.
you have the foundation, you have the principles, and it's pretty much impossible because it's so vast, right? Because endgames are so vast, and there are so many combinations of pieces and placement that can happen. You're not going to remember all of that, but as long as you have the foundation, then you're going to be able to figure your way out, basically.
That's deep.
I feel that's the way it operates.